Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and today I'm going to talk about peace and reconciliation talismans, and then just peace and reconciliation in general. So I just did a video on protection talismans, and I wanted to talk about peace and reconciliation talismans, the ones we have available at Renaissance Astrology, and also just about peace and reconciliation magic in general. So peace and reconciliation are one of several different possible approaches to problems and conflict. I discuss multiple conflict magical strategies in a video, and you can see the link to the video here on the page. Take a look at that. It talks about the other possible strategies. So we talked about protection. I don't do attack, so that's not something that you're going to be able to get at Renaissance Astrology, is like, how to, blow your enemies into dust. For various reasons. I have problems with it in terms of ethically, but also in terms of that as a practical strategy. I don't think that's generally not a very practical strategy. Protection, though, like I said, I talked about in the previous video, and lots of talismans for protection. So let's talk about this other peace and reconciliation. I just want to start off by saying I think there's sort of two, drives or pressures that are simultaneously happening with regard to peace and reconciliation as an approach to a conflict situation. First, there's a very natural and instinctive response to conflict, which is, shove back. If someone acts aggressively towards you, or you perceive them as acting aggressively, then the fight or flight instinct kind of kicks in. So at a minimum, you want to put up a barrier, to fend them off, and but otherwise, there's a real tendency to want to, attack back, and I think that's, like I said, almost instinctual. And the other heavy pressure, we got this heavy social pressure that starts in preschool. It's like, no fighting, no fighting. And this allows all sorts of verbal bullying, ostracism, scapegoating, stalking, harassment, power games, which can be really emotionally scarring, but no fighting. Can't we just get along? I mean, this is just heavily pushed on us in our society right now. And it's, very important not to physical violence. I agree with that. But doing nothing about conflict except requiring it not be physical, it ends up forcing people to acquiesce, causes subordination, and it really pushes that conflict underground. And really, no fighting, in other words, no aggressive response whatsoever, is not necessarily a great way to deal with situations. There are some situations where, you have to fight, you got to stand your ground. And I think that's, the problem is sorting those out. So really what we need to do is be able to see conflict and difficult situations objectively, and that's really difficult to do. We're get emotionally involved with that. We're directly feeling ourselves under threat. It's very stressful. But being able to step away from the conflict, see it objectively, and then to try to resolve in a rational way to resolve the conflict as fairly and expeditiously as possible. Lots of times you can't do it quickly. And that's another thing that's hard for people. It's like, I want to stop. If you took time to build into the situation, it's probably going to take some time to work it out and just kind of let the air out of it, let the emotion out of it. But nevertheless, you want to be as objective as possible. That's where good advice comes in, good counsel comes in. And really, if you're feeling pulled towards aggression, you always got to wonder about that. Peace and reconciliation is a good thing to always think about, but there's also plenty of situations where it's just not appropriate. Because it ends up being, like I said, used as a way to just acquiesce, and if someone acts aggressively, if you're always just giving into it, that's not really peace in any case. Additionally, like I said, fight or flight, there's the flight option, like remove yourself from the conflict, don't argue, get out of it. That's, again, often a possible situation. And like I said, peace and reconciliation. But when we're dealing with conflict, particularly with friends or family or at work, situations where you need to get along with people or really want to get along with them, then obviously peace and reconciliation is something you really need to think about. So we have a variety of different talismans for peace and reconciliation. I'd say probably our premier talisman for peace and reconciliation is Sirius. This is exactly what this talisman, this is the image for it. You can see this is the talisman. It's the dog star is the emblem that's used on it. This is a bronze talisman. Sirius is just, I can't recommend Sirius highly enough in a situation where you want to achieve peace and reconciliation. I've had great personal experience with it myself, and, this is a great talisman, and exactly focuses on that area, and it's exactly made for peace and reconciliation. So another possible talisman is, and this is the image for it here, is Andromeda. And let me just show you the talisman, which is, it's basically the same. You can see that's the same image there as the image. Andromeda is a constellation, and so very similar to fixed stars. That's how I treat it. Andromeda constellation, it says, Albertus Magnus says, this brings about lasting love, said between man and wife, but in any relationship. Indeed, it said to reconcile even those who've been adulterous. So really, this is, like I said, not only is this a really serious, super love talisman, but it's also really excellent for reconciliation. So particularly in a situation where you have, like I said, like a romantic relationship, but I think it has a general use as well. I think that you could use it in situations where you want to reconcile even beyond that, because it has such a great power for doing that. And another talisman that's very useful in this area is Regulus. I'm going to put this over here. Regulus is the heart of Leo, and it says that it bears away anger and melancholy and makes a man temperate, appeaseth wrath, and giveth favor. So this is like kind of chills things out, kind of mellows you out, mellows out the situation, relaxes things, temperate. So I think that's all really good. Again, it's fitting in that peace and reconciliation. Let me show you the talisman. Really gorgeous talisman. You can see the lion head there. One of my really most favorite designs for talismans. Regulus is also a good choice if you have an afflicted sun. So if your sun's in Libra or Aquarius and you're looking for sort of solar energy, it doesn't exactly correspond, but it has a definite, sort of analogy to it because it's the heart of Leo. This is a great talisman for somebody who is looking for, like I said, solar type energy for an afflicted sun in their natal chart. So finally, the last talisman is Alphecca, which is another fixed star talisman. And this says, bestow us goodwill and love and friendship. So again, this is a good talisman for reconciliation, for friendship, for love, for goodwill. So goodwill among men, peace and reconciliation. So again, another one of our peace and reconciliation talismans. And again, really cool. You can see the crown on the talisman there. Really cool image for that. So we have a good selection of peace and reconciliation talismans. I mean, this is not my biggest seller because, people typically when they're going to look for protection, Algo, we sell the most of Algo. It's the most powerful. People think that's the best. It certainly is powerful. I'm a real devotee of Algo. But again, you want to think about whether or not, the problem with a protection talisman is it's just putting up a shield. It's not doing anything about the underlying problem. If you can have peace and reconciliation with the person or the situation, then you're going to go to the root, you're going to dig out the root, and there's not going to be anything going, there's not going to need a barrier, right? Because the whole conflict is going to be resolved. So that's a definite strategy to consider. But again, it may be a situation where that's not going to happen. If you're talking about your ex-husband or something, and they're stalking you, it's like peace and reconciliation is not going to be an appropriate approach for you. It's not going to be always. It's just kind of pushed on us sometimes, but it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And there's lots of different situations, and you have to look at that and get the appropriate thing for that. One of the things I'm going to mention again that I did with Sirius is I had a real serious situation, sort of like a government-type situation, and I was, needed to deal with that. And so I did Sirius, and then I did a sugar jar, which is like a hoodoo spell. So what I did was take the kind of the logo of the government entity or whatever, and I put it on a piece of paper. I wrote my name over it 9 times, and then I stuck it in a jar full of sugar. And, that's trying to get them to, like I said, sweeten them up so that they would think better of me. And I did that sugar jar. I think I did the 23rd Psalm with that, as well as the Sirius. I did every single day for almost a year. And I got a really good result. Basically, it's like I've said recently, I'm almost glad that situation happened. As stressful as it was, the result ended up being really good in the end. So that was a really positive experience there. And again, this is very positive magic, positive influence. I'm not trying to mess with them or do anything to them or control them. I was just like, let's get along, let's work this out in a mutually agreeable way. So I think that's a good approach as well. Now, one of the things I want to talk about, kind of as my final thought here, is that there's a tendency to look at magic as say, okay, this is a way for me to get what I want. Okay, this is a way for me to control the external world. Okay, this is a way for me to make the outside circumstances conform to what I want and make people do what I want them to do and change everything around out there so that I have what I want. And I think about it particularly with the peace and reconciliation, but this is true, say, of a love talisman, but any talisman I think is true, is that a lot of the influence of these talismans is internal, right? And so when we're consecrating these talismans, when we're interacting with these celestial angels, we're interfacing with them, so to speak. We're starting to resonate to their frequency, if you want to think of it that way, the sort of sympathetic vibrations. We're aligning ourselves to them, then they're having a positive impact on us. So the peace and the reconciliation is coming to us first, okay? We're the ones who are becoming peaceful. We're the ones who are lowering the temperature. We're becoming more accepting. We're becoming more open to reconciliation, able to reconciliate. And as that happens, as we become more open to it, as far as we resonate to it, then the outside circumstances are going to help with that as well. So, if you just think about it, if you go through the day with a smile on your face, people often will smile back at you. Not always, but often they will. If you're angry, if you're cranky and upset, then you're going to get that back from people too. So, and it's easy to say, oh no, I'm totally innocent in this situation. I haven't done anything wrong. It's all those outside people. They're the ones who are messed up. And if you looked at yourself objectively, you would say, you know what? I fed into this conflict as well. I, maybe and often unconsciously have made things worse. So again, by using the peace and reconciliation talismans, we're affecting both internal and external. Because I wouldn't want to say this is it's all internal. There's no external effect either. There's an external effect as well. And of course, you're going to need to use the talismans and magic in addition to taking reasonable steps. Like I said, with the government thing I was dealing with, I did a lot of work. I did all sorts of submissions and stuff. I actually got a lawyer who was helping me. I did a lot of work, and to get the situation to go the way I wanted in a practical way too. That the magic is just sort of one arrow in the quiver. You need to have an overall practical plan for dealing with a situation. And again, compromise, flexibility, all these things are going to be necessary in order to resolve the conflict and get things to work out. But definitely, I think, like I said, I can attest from my own experience that the magic is a very useful adjunct to working out a conflict. And I'm always a big believer, like I said, in at least thinking about whether peace and reconciliation is a possibility. Lots of situations where it's not going to work, but if it is something that's a possibility, I definitely urge you to take a look at it and think about using it and to get serious about it in terms of like I said, my experience was, like I said, it was a daily practice for almost a year. Because it was a very serious situation, so it required a lot of effort on my part. But again, I put that effort in and I got a really good result out of it. And I definitely think the magic was very helpful. So you can see the links to those talismans. Check them out. Take a look at the magical conflict strategy video. Well, that goes into a lot more detail about it. But again, definitely something to think about and to be part of your multi-pronged approach in dealing with the conflict. And certainly, and I guess I say, blessed are the peacemakers. I mean, if you can make this work, then you're going to get, that's a really probably the best way to deal with a situation if that's an option for you. So very interesting, and I'm going to continue to talk about different types of Renaissance astrology talismans and the greater issues and magical strategies that those go along with. Talk to you soon.